And you may now take off your face masks if you like. Well, good morning. It's great to see everybody here today. I'm Alan Akana, the kahu or pastor of Koloa Union Church, and I welcome each and every one of you to our worship service. We have several announcements that I'm going to take a few moments to point out, and if there are any first-time visitors, please pick up your packet, and we have a gift for you and also a form for you to fill out so that we can know a little bit more about you. And I also wanted to point out that today's beautiful floral arrangement is given by Tom and Linda Armbruster in memory of Dr. Jared Smith, who was a physician here in Kōloa for the islands of Kauai and Niihau for a number of years until his death. And Tom and Linda are actually descendants of Dr. Jared's parents, Dr. James and Millicent Smith. But anyway, I think it's the birthday of Dr. Jared Smith's birth every year, Tom and Linda donate flowers just so that we can remember Dr. Jared Smith and his service here in the community. There is a membership gathering right after church today, so after I have a chance to greet people, we're just going to sit in here with our deacons, and I think 3 people so far have said that you're interested. We have room for a couple more if you're a last-minute person that wants to just learn more about what church membership is all about, and there's no requirement or pressure to join the church, but you can just learn more about us and decide afterwards if you want to join. We did change the church breakfast from the 4th Tuesday of the month to the last Tuesday of the month this week. So if you would like to just join me and a few others and have conversation, there's no agenda. We just kind of check in and have fun chatting, and we usually have one or two of our snowbirds that join us as well. So feel free to join us online on Zoom. All the information goes out on the weekly news. If you don't get that, you can sign up for it or just call the church office and ask Penny how to get the information to join us for a virtual breakfast. Okay, Salvation Army Lunch is coming up this coming Wednesday, and we have everyone we need except for one more volunteer is needed. So if you can volunteer, it's like mid-morning through early afternoon this Wednesday. See Suzanne Pearson and let her know that you can volunteer. The Neighbors in Need Special Mission Offering will be next week, so keep that in mind. There will be envelopes in the bulletin. Also next week at 3 o'clock is the Aha Pai'aina opening worship service. And this is the first time, I believe, in our church's history, meaning the Hawaii Conference of the United Church of Christ, where we can all join no matter where we are because it will all be done online. So if you're interested at all in worshiping with all of the churches in Hawaii that are United Church of Christ, that also will be on the weekly news. So be sure to take a look at that. Oh, and I also have a note handed to me this morning saying Prayers and Squares has the perfect Halloween gift for grandparents, aunties, and uncles. They have made cool masks to help celebrate the holiday. Be sure to stop by the table in front of Penny's office and get yours today. All donations will benefit our Prayers and Squares ministry. And for those of you who would like to give a small prayerful gift to a friend to let them know that you are thinking of them, we have our prayer friends with miniature Halloween prayer quilts. So be sure to check that out if you're interested at all. Also, please note our temporary guidelines on the top of page 5 and how we do our offerings on Sunday mornings now. And I believe that's it for the announcements that are not already in your bulletin. And if there are any additional announcements that you would like people to know, just let Penny or I know right away so that we can get those in the weekly news. Well, today's theme comes right out of our New Testament reading from Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 2, when he tells the Philippians, those who are the followers of Jesus in the city of Philippi, he tells them how they might shine as stars in the universe. And I would like for us to contemplate today, as we begin our worship service, how we, as followers of Jesus, might shine like stars in the universe, how the church of Jesus Christ might shine like a star in the universe, and also how our nation might shine like a star in the universe to all other nations. I could probably keep going, but I think you get the idea. It's time to focus on shining and how we might shine. So as Debbie comes up to lead us in the call to worship, I leave you with that and ask you to contemplate that for just a moment.
Good morning. Today's call to worship is adapted from Psalm 25. Let us be mindful of the mercy of the Lord and of God's steadfast love. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keeps God's covenant and decrees. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear God, and the Lord makes his covenant known to them. Let us worship God. Today's opening prayer is also from Psalm 25. Let us pray. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. Do not let my enemies exult over me. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all day long. Amen. Today's New Testament reading is from Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 2, verses 1 through 15. Listen to the word of God. If then there is any encouragement in Christ, any consolation from love, any sharing in the Spirit, any compassion and sympathy, then make my joy complete by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God also highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every other name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bend in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Therefore, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed me, not only in my presence, but much more now in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who is at work in you, enabling you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Do all things without murmuring and arguing, so that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, in which you shine like stars in the world. Today's gospel reading is from Matthew 21, verses 28 through 32. Listen for the word of God. Jesus asked the chief priests and the elders of the people who had come to him while he was teaching, "What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' He answered, 'I will not.' But later he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second and said the same. And he answered, 'I go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father?" They said, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Truly, I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him." May God bless the reading of the word, and may our hearts be open to receiving it.
Aloha, good morning, everyone. I'm Chris. This is
Michelle.
And we're going to be doing a song this morning. I thought I'd just preface it before because it might be an interesting choice to a few people. But I don't know. I don't think it matters what side of the political spectrum you're on right now. We know that things are just crazy here in the country and all over the world. And we just wake up and we're like, what is going on? What is happening? And, as Kahu sent us some of the verses before, I'm always reminded in those moments of struggle or pain that God has put a divine light in each one of us, that if we take the time to recognize it, that's a strength because we find not only God, but we find the shared connection between each other, no matter what our differences are. So anyway, this is called What's Up. 25 years and my life is still trying to get up that great big hill of hope for a destination. I realized quickly, as I knew I would, that this world was filled with this brotherhood of men, for whatever that means. And so I cry sometimes when I'm lying in bed just to get it all out, what's in my head. And I'm feeling a little peculiar. And so I wake up in the morning and I step outside and I take a deep breath and I get real high and I scream at the top of my lungs, what's going on? And I said, hey, I said, hey, what's going on? And I said, hey, I said, hey, what's going on? And I tried, oh my Lord, do I try every time in this institution, and I pray, oh my Lord, I do pray, I pray every day for a revolution. And so I cry sometimes when I'm lying in bed and just get it all out, what's in my head. And I'm feeling a little peculiar. So I wake in the morning and I step outside
top of my lungs. So what's going on? And I said, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. I said, hey, well, what's going on? And I said, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. I said, hey, well, what's going on?
25 years of my life is still trying to get up that great big hill of hope for a destination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris and Michelle. What a great song and how appropriate for today. Well, I have to say, there are a lot of people that know a whole lot more than me about virtually everything. I know this because I check out Facebook just about every day. And I see that there are people who have very strong feelings and opinions and facts that might not be exactly how I see the world, but I have to tell you, the confidence that is out there is just astounding to me. I was thinking today about my own education, and I'll just tell you, I feel like I got a very good, solid liberal arts education in college, and basically what I mean by that is I got a little bit of everything, like psychology and sociology and political science and economics and religion and on and on and on. And then I also focused on something in particular, and I happened to focus on philosophy. And so for 2 years in college, most of what I did was took classes on truth, wisdom, knowledge. And part of that was, how do you determine what is knowledge and what is truth as opposed to what is opinion and logic and most of all ethics. In fact, I think all of my, or at least most of all of my electives in philosophy had to do with ethics. And sometimes when I'm looking at Facebook, I'll see that somebody is actually saying something that's just not true. And I'll think to myself, well, you know, I have a pretty good background in terms of my education. And then I also think, well, I also got a good dose of politics because when I was, during the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I went on my college's East Asia study program. And so I actually went to places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, China, Korea, and Japan. And for the whole summer, I not only went to these places, but I read books and studied politics and history and religion and culture of all of these places. And every once in a while, I'll read something that somebody says with absolute confidence on Facebook about something in one of those places where I've been and studied that has nothing to do with the reality of when I was there. And then I've also thought, gee, for 15 plus years I studied theology, biblical interpretation, church history, and so on and so forth. And I have a master's degree and a doctorate. And every once in a while I look at Facebook and I look at somebody say something about the Bible or Jesus or God or the church, and I just say, it's just not true. It's the opposite of truth. And so in my naivete, I think early on in my early Facebook days, I would think, I bet if I just pointed out to people that what they're saying with absolute confidence has nothing to do with the truth, they will just be so grateful. especially if they're quoting the Bible out of context. And they would just say, Alan, thank you so much for pointing this out, because like you, I'm searching for truth too. But what I learned was the responses were never out of gratitude. They were usually very hostile. How dare you question my worldview? How dare you even think that you know more than me about God or theology or East Asian politics or ethics? And I just think, when I look back over my education and my experiences, I have to tell you, I feel like I know this much. I feel like I'm not in a position to tell everybody the truth about everything. But there are certain things that I do know because of my education and my experience. But it just seems so rare for me when I point something out on Facebook with somebody that I disagree with, that they ever even say, thank you. So I've just kind of learned to not respond to most of the things that I see on Facebook that I either disagree with or just know it's absolutely untrue, because after not even years, but after a while of saying things like, well, actually, that's not what the Bible says at all, or actually, that's taking those words of Jesus entirely out of context, or actually, the meaning of this story is just the opposite of what you're saying here on Facebook. I just learned that most people don't want to hear from me at all. However, recently I decided, because this was a friend that just seemed so misguided, I thought I had to say something, and I did it, I thought, in the most gentle, loving way, and guess what? I got more Bible verses thrown back at me out of context than I think I can remember. And I've just kind of learned to say, oh, God, help us. Help me to be patient. Help me to be humble, because I know I don't know everything. In fact, I was just thinking as I was preparing for this sermon, even with all my education, I feel like I know so very little about God, about faith, about the universe. And when I'm talking to somebody that knows with absolute certainty all of the mysteries of life, including when life begins and exactly how the world is going to end down to the minutest details, I have to just say, it's just not even worth my time. However, I have to tell you that it really bothers me when I look at what's happening in terms of what's happening in our country in terms of our relationship with truth and promises. Because what I'm finding is that so many people do not really care about truth at all. And I'm also realizing that it is absolutely okay for many people to make a promise and then to break that promise. And as I think about it, I know that falsehood and the telling of falsehoods is not new. People, I'm sure, have been saying false things since the beginning of human language. But there's a couple things that are different now in our culture that we're experiencing like never before. And one of those is we all walk around with these little cameras and video cameras called cell phones. And so many of the things that people are saying happened in a certain way, we can hold up our cell phone or upload it up into the cloud and show the world that's not how it happened. And yet people will still believe that it happened just the way that they want to believe it happened. So the one thing that's changed is we can actually show people that's not true. And when somebody breaks a promise, in the old days, they could say, well, that's not really what I said. I didn't say it exactly like that. Or so-and-so misquoted me. But now we see people, including our nation's leaders, saying things 4 years ago, 3 years ago, last week, and pretending that the promises they made just don't matter at all. And there it is, right on video. We can see it. And so it seems like in the old days, and here's another thing that has changed a lot. In the old days, if you were caught breaking a promise, or you were caught telling a blatant lie, you were actually embarrassed, right? And so was everybody else. It was a bad thing to lie. It was a bad thing to break a promise, and you felt shame. And hopefully, if you were a person of integrity, you would admit it and change your behavior. But today, it seems like it's so okay to tell lies and break your promises because that's just what we do now. That people are getting away with all kinds of things at every level. And I have to tell you, as somebody who studied philosophy and theology, this utter disregard for truth breaks my heart. It is so sad, and sometimes I wonder, all that education and all that training, was that for anything? And also, as someone who does my best to follow Jesus of Nazareth, who said these words, "The truth shall set you free," I am just horrified of what's happening in our culture and in our body politic. There is an utter disregard for truth, and breaking promises just seems so okay to so many, many people. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about it? Where can we find some hope in this darkness that we're living in? And I do mean darkness. And as we think about our New Testament reading this morning, at least in part, we find our hope and we find some things to do about it. So the Apostle Paul is telling the Philippians, meaning those who follow Jesus in the city of Philippi, he's telling them to have the same mind. And he goes on to say, have the mind of Christ. And then he goes on to explain what that actually means in the following verses in Philippians chapter 2. And to have the mind of Christ, first, to the Apostle Paul, means humility. To actually be able to say, I may not know everything. And my worldview can still be changed, and life might actually be better. To have the humility to say, I might have power over another person or another group. But humility means that you're willing to give up your power for the benefit of somebody else, even if you may not like that other person or that other group of people. Humility for the Apostle Paul, in terms of when he looked to Jesus and said, have the same mind that was in Christ Jesus, he meant to be able to look at the power you have, whoever you are, and say that this power is a gift to serve other people in humility. Now, humility doesn't mean that anyone is actually better than you, because that's kind of confusing in the text. But it means to consider that others might just have something in their head that would be helpful to you. So humility is key. The second thing that the Apostle Paul tells his readers about the mind of Christ that they should have is what he calls the emptying. And what he means by that is Jesus emptied himself of what? Of all of his privilege, of his power and his privilege. You see, the Apostle Paul points out that Jesus was the most powerful human being that ever lived. He had the authority of God behind him, and yet he emptied himself of that for the sake of humanity. He emptied himself of any privilege that he had as the Son of God to serve other people. And if we're going to have the same mind of Christ, we must also say, how might I empty myself? What am I holding on to that's filling up my heart or my mind or my being that I can just let go of and empty myself of? And then finally, the Apostle Paul points to sacrifice. Jesus sacrificed all for humanity. And the mind of Christ, if we are going to share in Jesus' mind, according to the Apostle Paul, then we too must be willing to sacrifice. And that simply means giving up something that's rightfully yours or that you believe is rightfully yours for the sake of someone else. So the question is, if we are going to have the mind of Christ, well, actually, three questions. How might we be like Jesus in the area of humility? For me, that means I can't use all of my education and say, follow me, I'm your spiritual leader, don't ever question me because I know everything. I'll just tell you right now, I know that's not true, and I think all of you together know way more than I do about God and faith. But in humility, hopefully we can have conversations even when we disagree with each other. So that's number one, humility. Number two, we must ask ourselves, what do we need to empty ourselves of so that we can actually live in community together, including the community of this nation? What are we holding on to that we just need to let go of and empty ourselves of? And then finally, what is God calling us to sacrifice to the benefit of the whole? Now, Paul makes it really clear that this is difficult stuff. Sacrifice is often very difficult. To empty yourself of something that you've been holding on to for most of your life is difficult, and being humble is difficult. Paul makes it really clear that what Jesus, or what he's asking you to do, in other words, to have the same mind of Jesus and have the same mind together, is quite possibly the most difficult thing you will ever do in your life. Giving up that stuff, power, privilege, sacrificing the stuff that you've been holding on to, that perhaps is the most difficult thing we're asked to do in life, including the life of the church. And I think that's why Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, so work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Sometimes we read that and we think we should fear and tremble before God, who's an angry judge, but that's not Paul's point at all. It's not that we should fear God. We do fear letting go of things. We fear emptying ourselves. We fear the unknown. And one of the reasons there's so much fear is because we have so few examples in our lives, in our politics, in our history, of people who had lots of power and lots of privilege and held lots of authority, who were so willing just to give it all up. They're out there, and I think all of us can think of who some of those people are. Gandhi comes to my mind, Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr. There are many people out there throughout history that had power, that had privilege, that had authority, that gave things up in order to benefit the whole, the entire group, the entire world, the entire country. But it is difficult. And to work out our salvation in fear and trembling means, to Paul, that we should move forward in this way, holding the mind of Christ before us, willing to be humble, willing to be emptying, willing to sacrifice. Yes, it's difficult. And that's why Paul goes on to say, the loving presence of God is with you. You don't have to do this difficult, hard stuff on your own. And in fact, Paul doesn't say that God's there behind you, shoving you out into the great unknown. He actually says in Philippians 2, God is inside you. God's within you, giving you the will, the desire, and the energy to do this difficult stuff, this difficult work of being humble, the difficult work of emptying yourself, the difficult work of being sacrificial and giving things up for the benefit of others. And then Paul not only tells the believers of Jesus, the followers of Jesus in Philippi, that it's going to be okay because God is within you, and yes, it's difficult, but you're going to be able to do it because God's inside of you and loving others every single moment. But he goes on to describe this vision of what it looks like, and he says, and you will shine like stars in the universe. And I absolutely love that. And that's why I asked at the beginning of the service, how might we as a church, how might our nation shine like stars in the universe? I want to tell you, I believe that the 21st century is our grand opportunity to shine. And we have a choice as individuals, as church, and as a nation. Do we want to shine? Or do we want to just keep fighting each other and go back to the way things have been all along? We have the chance right now as a nation to shine before all other nations. And let me give you an example. In our country, black people, African Americans, have been saying for so long, we are hurting. This feels so unjust to us. This feels so wrong. It's been 150 years since people of color have been able to vote. Things have changed a little. There's a lot more that needs to be changed. People of color keep saying it's still hurting. And a few examples that I've just read about or thought about or heard over the news this week. An African American mother whose teenage son is a track star, who she has had to tell, you may not go running in our neighborhood unless you are wearing your full track gear and you're running with your white friends, because I'm afraid you might get shot. A good student who's a track star is not allowed by his mom to run in his neighborhood because she's afraid he might get shot. Now, of course, there's people that say, oh, she's overreacting. But if we're paying attention at all, we know that that mother has very good reason to be concerned for her son's life. And as I've been saying for well over a year now, virtually every black parent in this country has to have the talk with their children before they reach adolescence. And that talk has to do with how you survive an encounter with a police officer. The talk which I don't know any white person has ever had to have with their kids. But as I understand it, virtually every black parent has had this conversation with their child. And when I say survive, I'm not exaggerating. They tell their children what to do, how to act, what to say, so they will live through an encounter with a police officer. And then, of course, I have to mention Breonna Taylor, who was quietly, after midnight, in her own home, unarmed. And the police broke the door down and shot 20 bullets into their home. 5 of them hit her, and she was declared dead on the scene. As we've all heard on the news this week, all 3 of the officers who opened fire were not indicted for shooting an innocent woman who was home, probably sleeping in bed after midnight. One of those officers was indicted for not hitting her with 3 of those bullets. And what that says to the black community is it's okay for police officers to enter into the home of black people and open fire, but it's not okay if they miss. And her family has to deal with that. And it would be horrible, absolutely, in my mind, almost unforgivable, if this were an isolated incident. But we know that this is something that happens over and over and over and over and over, and that's why virtually every black parent has to have the talk with his or her children before adolescence. But we have an opportunity to change that if we want to. As a country, we have an opportunity to shine, and this can be our time to shine so brightly that the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. will finally come to its fruition, where children and adults alike will be judged by the content of their character alone, and not at all by the color of their skin. We have an opportunity now as a country to change our policies and the things that are so wrong, that we all know are wrong. We have the opportunity to shine. But I want you to know that the Apostle Paul was writing not a letter not to the Roman Empire. He was writing a letter to the followers of Jesus who lived in an unjust empire. And he said, you have the opportunity to shine. You, each and every one of you, and us together. I don't know what our country's leaders are going to do. And I sometimes cringe and even cry thinking about it, based on what I've seen our country do in the past. But I do know that as followers of Jesus Christ, in the midst of the darkness, as dark as it may be, we have the opportunity to shine by having the mind of Christ, by embracing humility, by willing to empty ourselves of all the things that hold us back from loving other people and from changing and transforming so that the world will be better. And we have the opportunity to sacrifice, to give something up in order that the world is better. We can shine. And I want you to know, as I look around this congregation, I see lots of shining going on already. I see people who stand up for injustice. I see people who speak out against things that are untrue and not right. I see people who roll up their sleeves and feed people in the community who are hungry. I see people who make a difference in so many ways. I'm reminded of a dear friend from a former church who died earlier this year. It was a church in Texas, and this woman looked like your typical Texas Mary Kay woman with the big hair, with the makeup that probably kept Mary Kay in business for many years. And she had a heart of gold, and she shined. And one of her favorite things that she said over and over again was, "Shine, y'all, shine." And whenever I think of her, I get a smile on my face. And I remind myself that it is possible that I can shine, that we all do shine, and that we can all continue to shine, even if others choose not to. So I leave you with this. Shine, y'all. Shine. Amen. And now it's time for the sharing of joys and concerns and the prayers of the people, and I'll invite the ushers to bring any prayer cards that people may have left. Okay. And I'm going to begin just by pointing out that we do have many of our prayer requests already on page 7. And I will begin with a thank you from Pat. It says, thank you. I love my quilt and feel such warmth and tenderness when I wrap myself in it. There have been many times when difficult times arise. Now I can wrap myself with a quilt and will feel the joy and prayers that come from it to help me guide myself in the right directions. Blessings to you all, Pat. Thank you, Pat. It was our pleasure. And thank you for your kind. Oh, and it says, to the Prayers and Squares gals, thank you so much. A simple act of kindness has a beauty all its own. Blessings to you, Pat. So anyway, Prayers and Squares wanted to pass that on and share it with all of us. So thank you to Prayers and Squares for the wonderful, meaningful work that you do. And this is from Bonnie. Joy, I was able to volunteer at Kumu's Cupboard last week, and thankful that we have chosen to have them as our outreach this month, as shipping costs have impacted them as it has all of us. If unsure of what you might like to donate, monetary gifts are always appreciated. So thank you, Bonnie. And then from Becky, please pray for my brother's good friend Jake from Oregon. He was in a terrible car accident this past week and has multiple injuries. Okay, so prayers for Jake. And from Grace Eleanor, Ruth Castle, longtime organist in Waimea and throughout the island, is in hospice in Honolulu. Family has been called to be with her. So prayers for Ruth and for the family. And from Shalee, prayers for a family member who will be starting chemotherapy. And from Doug, for his mom, Jo Duvachel, who suffered a stroke yesterday. And she was kept at home with Cheryl. So we'll keep Jo in our prayers. And from Steve and Norma, so happy and thrilled that our second grandchild, the first girl in our family, Natalie, was born on Friday in Los Angeles. God bless her and her family. Oh, that's wonderful. And then from Debbie, Amy and Nick Galente from Koloa. Nick had pancreas removed and is undergoing chemo, and also a safe trip back from the Mayo Clinic. Well, there are many things to pray for, and of course there is our list on page 7 in the bulletin. And we also have many joys, and a few were shared today, but keep in mind that every single blessing that you have comes from God. Let us pray. Oh God, in the quietness of this place, we give you thanks for your blessings, for the joys that you give to us, and especially the joy of one another, for the love that we have with other people. And we also thank you for the joy of your great, wonderful, wondrous, and beautiful creation, and that we can enjoy it so often simply by looking outside. Oh God, as we consider all those who are injured and sick, we pray for your healing wherever possible. And God, for those in hospice care and in situations where life is or will soon be winding down, we pray, oh God, for your grace, for your mercy, for comfort, for peace, not only for the person that is passing, but for all of the family members who, although they celebrate almost always a life and with gratitude, but also feel grief and sadness. Oh God, we give you thanks for all of the opportunities that we have to celebrate life, new life, ongoing life, a second chance at life, and the life of this church, which over and over again reaches out to people in love and gives hope and shines. We give you thanks. And God, now as our worship service winds down and comes to a close, we ask that you remind us that our worship of you is not done, that we take you with us wherever we go. And every single way that we love you and love others and allow you to love others through us is a continuation of our worship. Oh God, we give you thanks for this opportunity to be together with you and to remember these very, very important things. Amen.
Sometimes I lay under the moon, I thank God I'm breathing, but then I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. It's not about win or lose, 'cause we all lose when they feed on the souls of the innocent. Blood-drenched pavement, keep on moving though the waters stay raging. In this maze you can lose your way. It might drive you crazy, but don't let it phase you, no way, no way. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, oh, one day, one day, one day. One day we all will change, keep all the same. Down with the violence, down with the hate. I'm proud to be singing the songs under such freedom. Why oh, one day, why oh, one day, why oh, one my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, oh, one day, one day, one day. Oh.
Thank you.
Amen, and thank you so much for that song. And now it's time to put our face masks back on, and I invite you, as you do so, to keep it on till you're either back to your vehicle or off the property. And in just a moment, Steve is going to come and sing our benediction. But just before he comes, I want to remind you to shine and look for opportunities to shine, and know that those opportunities are always wherever you are at every moment of the day. So shine, y'all, shine.
Please stand. O Father, let thy love remain. O Son, may I thy likeness gain. O Spirit, stay to comfort me. O Triune God, praise be